She thought I was asleep when she came in. I wasn't. I was lying on the hardwood floor of our laundry room, underneath a rack of half-dry shirts, next to the cat's litter box. I don't know why. I had a headache and didn't want to be perceived. She tiptoed through the hallway, keys jingling like wind chimes. It was 2:43 a.m. She didn't call out to me, didn't check the bedroom, just went straight into the kitchen, opened the fridge, and poured herself a glass of wine. Then she sat down at the table and pulled out her phone. I could hear the screen taps from the other room. What kind of married woman comes home at nearly 3 in the morning and doesn't even check if her husband's awake? Eleanor does. Or I guess I should say did. I heard her laugh. Not loudly, not like she used to, but this short, shaky snort like she was trying not to make noise but couldn't help it. Then the unmistakable whoop-whoop of a voice message being played. I didn't mean to move, but the floor creaked under my ribs. She went silent. For about 10 seconds, I thought she'd heard me and was going to come in. But then I heard her whisper, "You're so bad," to her phone, not to me. I got up like a snake uncoiling. Quiet. Careful. I stepped over the cat, opened the basement door, and closed it behind me before she even finished her wine. I walked down the stairs in the dark and sat on the concrete floor. I felt the cold crawl into my knees. I liked it. I stayed down there until I heard her go to bed, 4:07 a.m. That was the first moment I realized something was broken. But it wasn't the moment I left. That came 3 days later. I was cleaning out the bottom drawer of her nightstand, looking for a missing charger, not snooping, when her phone buzzed. It lit up with a name I hadn't seen since 2019. Deacon, no ring emoji this time. That was literally the contact name. Deacon, her ex. The one she described as an absolute wildfire of a human being. The one who took years off her life. The one she never wanted to speak to again. Except now his name was glowing on her screen, with no ring emoji, like that was some private joke between them. I didn't open the message. I didn't have to. The notification preview read, "I miss your voice. Still tastes like honey." I know what you're thinking. Why didn't I confront her? Why didn't I blow up? Because I'm not that guy. I'm not a fighter. I'm the kind of guy who apologizes when someone bumps into me. I once cried when I stepped on a snail barefoot. So instead of talking to her, I opened a spreadsheet. I logged every suspicious moment, every whisper, every late return, every girl's night that didn't add up. I turned it into a full-blown investigative report, color-coded, with tabs. Then I deleted it. What was the point? I already knew the truth. She was somewhere else, mentally, emotionally, probably physically, and I was just background noise. So I disappeared. I didn't make a scene. I didn't pack much. Just one bag and the keys to my late uncle's cabin in Vermont. I left a note. For words. Laundry room. 2:43 a.m. That was it. I was gone before sunset. I thought she might call, or show up, or even get angry. But she didn't. Not for almost a year. And then she came. Different. Trembling. Alone. And whatever she came to say, it ruined everything all over again. The first thing I noticed was her coat. It wasn't hers. Eleanor never wore anything synthetic. She was obsessive about materials. Linen in the summer, wool in the winter, and this strange snobbery about leather being too performative. But the coat she was wearing now was cheap polyester, navy blue, and at least 2 sizes too big. She looked like a kid playing dress-up in someone else's closet. I opened the cabin door not because I wanted to see her, but because I wasn't expecting anyone, and the knock startled me. When I saw her standing there, dark under her eyes, lips chapped, fingers shaking around a gas station coffee cup, I didn't say a word. I just leaned against the doorframe and waited. "I didn't know where else to go," she said. Not "hi." Not "I've been looking for you." Not even "I'm sorry." Just that. She didn't ask to come in. She just stepped over the threshold like she still had a right. And I let her, because I didn't trust myself to speak. The last time I saw her, she was lying in our bed with her back to me, breathing like someone completely unbothered by the weight of the lie she was living. Now she walked like each step cost her something. Her movements were twitchy, uneven. She flinched when I closed the door behind us. She sat at the small kitchen table like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Then she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded photograph. She slid it across the table without looking at me. It was a blurry Polaroid of her and Deacon. He was holding a toddler. At first, I didn't get it. I just stared at it, confused, trying to process what I was looking at. Then she said, She's not his. I blinked. I thought she was, but she's yours. I laughed. Not a happy laugh, more like a bark. It came out before I could stop it. I hadn't spoken to this woman in almost a year, and now she shows up with a picture of a child I'd never seen before, tells me it's mine, and expects me to what? Thank her? That's not how math works, I said finally. She was born early. Try again. She was born in December. I sat down. My knees didn't want to hold me anymore. The silence stretched so long I could hear the fridge humming. Then she whispered, he's gone. I didn't ask who. I already knew. Deacon. Gone where? I don't know. Mexico. Maybe Texas. I don't know. She was shaking now, gripping the coffee cup so hard the plastic cracked. He got weird. Possessive. He didn't want her, but he didn't want me to have her either. I think he followed me once. After the clinic. Clinic. That word dropped like a stone between us. I didn't know what to ask first. Was the baby really mine? Why come to me now? What clinic? What happened between her and Deacon? Why the hell did she lie? But I didn't say any of that. I just stared at the photo. The kid had my ears. And suddenly, none of it felt theoretical anymore. There was a baby. Maybe my baby. Out there. Involved in something way more chaotic than I ever wanted to be near. Eleanor looked up at me with those eyes I used to believe. I need your help, she said. Please. Just this once. I should have slammed the door. Instead, I asked the one question I already regretted. Where is she? Eleanor didn't answer. She just said, I shouldn't have brought her. And that's when I realized. We weren't alone. The thing about living alone in a cabin deep in Vermont is that you hear everything. You hear the furnace hum differently when the pressure drops. You hear snow settling on the roof in thick, slow-motion thuds. You hear every branch that taps against a window, every pine cone that lands just wrong. So when she said it, I shouldn't have brought her. I realized immediately that I hadn't heard anyone else come in. No second set of footsteps. No car. No door opening. She wasn't talking about someone in the cabin. She meant someone already inside. I looked toward the hallway. It was dark. The guest room door was shut. It had been closed since I moved in. I felt that drop in my stomach, that tight pull behind the ribs, the one that tells you, you've missed something. Eleanor stood up slowly. She's not sleeping. I tried, but she doesn't. Not really. I asked her how long they'd been driving. For days, she said. I asked when the last time the girl had eaten was. Eleanor flinched. She won't take food from me anymore. Not since the motel in Pennsylvania. But she doesn't cry. Not even once. Something in me went cold then. I don't know what I was expecting, but not this. Not this brittle version of Eleanor, talking in half sentences, her skin pale and translucent like paper that had been soaked and dried too many times. I wanted to shake her, scream at her, but all I could do was walk to the guest room door. I paused there, hand on the knob. You sure you want to open that? She asked. I wasn't, but I did. The room was completely dark. Curtains drawn. No nightlight. No lamp. Just the soft mechanical ticking of the old analog clock on the far wall. And then I saw her, curled up on the edge of the twin bed, knees tucked to her chest, eyes wide open and staring directly at me. No blinking. No flinching. Just watching. She looked about 3, maybe 4. Dark hair. Pale. Wearing a little fleece hoodie that looked like it hadn't been washed in days. Her hands were tucked under her legs, but something about her posture was wrong. Like she'd been sitting that way for hours and didn't feel it. I cleared my throat, gently. Hey there. I'm James. No response. Just that staring. Your mom says you're tired. Still nothing. Behind me, Eleanor whispered, she doesn't talk. I turned my head. At all. She did. Before. When she was younger. She's not even 4. I know. I stepped into the room, carefully. The air was stale. Not dirty. Just unmoved. Like the windows hadn't been opened since fall. The girl watched every step I took. I knelt beside the bed. You hungry? She blinked. That was the first time she'd moved. Eleanor behind me let out a breath like a prayer. She blinked for you, she said, almost in disbelief. I didn't know what to make of that. It's not like blinking is a miracle. But then I realized she wasn't exaggerating. She meant it literally. The kid hadn't blinked once the entire time Eleanor had been with her. Not during 4 days of driving. Not during motel check-ins. Not during breakfast. She just sat, watching, like a still frame. I stood and motioned Eleanor out into the hallway. I closed the door behind us and looked her dead in the eye. What happened to her? Eleanor wouldn't meet my gaze. She started changing after we left the clinic, she said. At first I thought it was the stress or traveling too much. I thought maybe she was grieving. Grieving who? I asked. And then Eleanor's voice dropped so low I barely heard it. Her twin. Silence. I felt the hallway close in on me. Like the walls suddenly had opinions about what she just said. I tried to connect the pieces in my head, but they weren't fitting. You never told me you were pregnant, let alone with twins. I didn't know until the second ultrasound. And by then, everything with Deacon was already collapsing. He didn't want kids. I thought maybe it was a blessing. But then they told me only one of them had made it through the third trimester. And the other? She swallowed. They called it vanishing twin syndrome. Said it was common. Said it happens all the time. I looked at the door. She started staring after that. I asked. She nodded. And you think she's what, haunted? Eleanor didn't answer, but her eyes did. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about something that followed them. Something that might not have come alone. I didn't sleep that night. Not a minute. I sat in the armchair across from the fireplace, half wrapped in an old quilt, staring at the guest room door. It stayed closed the entire time. No sounds. No movement. Not even the shuffle of a blanket or the creak of a bed frame. You'd think that would be comforting, but it wasn't. Silence that deep, that absolute, feels unnatural when there's a child involved, especially one who hadn't blinked until 12 hours ago. Eleanor passed out on the couch. She didn't even make it to the second cushion. I watched her drift off with a mix of pity and quiet resentment. She was sunken, unwashed, hair tangled, fingers twitching in her sleep like she was dreaming of falling. I knew I should feel something more, maybe grief, maybe rage, but I was too far gone for either. All I felt was distance, like we were just two strangers camped out in the same collapsing tent, waiting for the storm to decide who it wanted to take first. At around 3:40 a.m., I heard it. A voice. Tiny. Muffled. In the hallway. I stood up fast enough to feel dizzy. The cabin was dead quiet except for that soft, whispering hum, like someone humming a lullaby with the wrong notes. I stepped closer. The sound was coming from behind the guest room door. I didn't knock. I didn't want to wake Eleanor. I just pressed my ear to the wood and listened. There were two voices. One was the girl's. The other was lower, scratchier. The kind of voice you hear in dreams you wake up from sweating. The girl was saying something over and over. I could barely make it out. Are you still hungry? Pause. Are you still hungry? Longer pause. Then the other voice, so quiet it might have been a trick of the wind, whispered back. Not yet. I stepped back, heart pounding in my throat. My first instinct was to burst in, to throw the light on and pull her out of the room. But I didn't. I stood frozen in the hallway like a man realizing the water he's been swimming in is too still, too deep, and maybe not water at all. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. The whispering stopped. I opened the door slowly. She was sitting in the same spot on the bed, legs crossed now, facing the window. The curtains were still drawn. Her eyes were closed, but her lips were moving. No sound, just a silent recitation, like she was praying in a language only she understood. I didn't see a second person. No closet was open. No windows unlocked. No signs that anyone else had been there. And yet, the cold in that room, it didn't match the rest of the cabin. It wasn't just drafty, it was wrong. It felt dense, like walking into fog you couldn't see but could feel clinging to your ribs. I backed out, closed the door, and finally, woke Eleanor. She looked at me like a sleepwalker yanked out of a dream. What time is it? She asked. What did you mean when you said she doesn't take food from you anymore? I said, ignoring the question. She rubbed her eyes. I don't know. She just won't. She stopped after the clinic. You mean after the twin? No, I mean the second clinic. In Ohio. I stared at her. What second clinic? Eleanor sat up slowly, like her body didn't want to comply. There was something wrong with her heartbeat. At least that's what they said. I took her in. But when we got there, they said it wasn't her they were hearing. What? She pulled something out of her bag. A notebook. Spiral-bound. Weather-stained. My journal, she said, handing it to me. From that month. I didn't want to read it. I already knew it wasn't going to make anything better. But I opened to the page marked with a torn envelope and read the first line. She sleeps with her eyes open now, and she says I shouldn't sleep at all. Below it, another entry, written in a shakier hand. She says her sister's still here, and she gets jealous when I forget to say goodnight to both. And then, scribbled almost violently in the corner of the page, I don't know who I tucked in last night. I dropped the notebook. Eleanor just watched me. Then she said the one thing that truly broke whatever was left of my rational mind. She didn't say not yet to you, did she? My blood went cold. You heard it. Eleanor nodded. She says that sometimes. Always to someone I can't see. But only when we stay somewhere new. My voice was hollow. What does it mean? She hesitated. And then, in the flattest, most lifeless tone I've ever heard her use, she answered. It means she's not ready. But one day she will be. Eleanor vanished sometime between 4 o'clock and 5:30 in the morning. I know because I got up at 4 to use the bathroom, stepped over her sleeping form on the couch, and saw her hand still gripping the corner of that journal like it was a life raft. But when I came back less than 2 hours later, she was gone. The blanket was crumpled. The journal was on the floor. The front door was cracked just enough for a breeze to blow in, and the only sign she'd even been there was one muddy footprint on the floorboards leading out. At first, I thought maybe she'd gone for air. Sometimes people do that when they're unraveling. I've done it myself. Just need to step outside and let the cold slap you back into your body. But I checked the porch, the woodshed, even behind the propane tanks. Nothing. She didn't take her coat, or her bag, or her shoes. The kid was still asleep, or pretending to be. Either way, I didn't hear a sound from the guest room. By 7 a.m., the sky had turned the color of dishwater, and fog had started pooling between the trees. I threw on boots and a flannel, grabbed a flashlight even though it was already light out, and started calling her name. Not shouting, just that sharp, restrained voice people use when they're more scared than they want to admit. Eleanor. Nothing. Elle, you out here? The woods behind the cabin aren't deep, but they're old, thick with brush, trees leaning over each other like drunks at last call. And there's this trail, not an official one, that snakes through the thicket and ends at a creek that dries out in the summer. I used to walk it when I first got here, just to keep my legs from forgetting how to move. That's where I found the scarf. It was hanging from a branch, carefully tied in a knot. Not dropped, not snagged, tied. It wasn't hers. Eleanor doesn't wear scarves. She always said they made her feel too librarian. But I recognized this one. I'd seen it once before. On the girl. She'd been wearing it the first night they arrived, for all of 2 seconds, before Eleanor took it off and folded it into her bag. It was bone white, embroidered with a little navy star near one edge. And now it was fluttering in the wind like a flag left behind by someone who didn't know which country they belonged to. I didn't touch it. I don't know why. I just kept walking, heart pounding harder with every step. About 30 feet further down the trail, I found something worse. Footprints. 3 sets. One was clearly Eleanor's, barefoot, shallow, a little uneven like she was limping. The second was smaller, lighter, but deep. The girl's, maybe, running. The third set didn't make sense. They were wide, wider than my boots. Bare too, but deep, almost too deep. Like whatever made them had more weight than it should have. More weight than a human being could carry. The spacing was wrong. Too far apart, like the legs were longer, or like it wasn't walking so much as lurching. The trail ended at the edge of the creek. And in the mud just before the drop-off was a single word, scrawled with a stick or a finger. Waiting. I turned around and bolted back to the cabin, adrenaline masking the dread pooling behind my ribs. When I got back, the girl was standing in the living room. She hadn't made a sound. She was just there. Her eyes were open, mouth shut, and something about her was off. Different. It wasn't just posture this time. It was her face. Her jaw looked tense, hands clenched at her sides, like she was holding something back. I knelt carefully, like you would near a stray dog. "Where's your mother?" I asked. She tilted her head, not like she didn't understand the question, but like she didn't like it. Then she said something I hadn't heard her say before. "Can I draw?" Her voice was small, polite, but hollow. I nodded, grabbed a pad and pen from the drawer by the fridge, and handed them to her. She sat cross-legged on the floor and began sketching with a kind of mechanical precision that didn't match her age. I watched. At first it looked like a house. 4 walls, a door, a tree next to it. Then she drew 2 stick figures, one small, one taller. She scribbled long hair on both. Then she added something else. Something off to the side. Large. Wide. A circle for a head, but no face. Arms that dragged down like ropes. She handed me the pad and said one word. Visitor. I didn't know what to do. I looked back at the drawing. The figure next to the house wasn't just faceless, it was upside down. Its feet were where the head should be. Its limbs went the wrong way. That's when I realized something else. In the drawing, the smaller figure, presumably her, was holding the larger one's hand. I looked up, and for the first time, I saw her smile. It wasn't a child's smile. It was something else entirely. I burned the drawing. I know that makes me sound unstable, but I didn't do it out of fear. I did it because I felt watched. Not by the girl. Not even by Eleanor, wherever she was. It was the picture itself. The longer I looked at it, the more it felt like it was changing. That's what really pushed me over the edge. At first, the figure in the drawing looked like it was facing the house. That upside-down shape, the rope arms, the blank circle head. But a few minutes later, when I went to look again, the feet were turned the other way. It was facing out now, like it had noticed I was watching and decided to watch back. I tossed the pad into the wood stove and didn't look away until it was ash. The girl didn't object. She didn't even flinch. Just sat there on the floor, still holding the pen, blinking slowly like I'd taken away something irrelevant. That night, everything shifted. It wasn't dramatic. There wasn't thunder or screams or anything you'd expect. But if you've ever lived in a house long enough, you start to recognize its moods. The sounds it makes. The way the walls breathe. The way floorboards settle. And that night, the house was wrong. It started with the clocks. I have two. One in the kitchen, one in the hallway. Both analog, both battery-powered. Around 11:45 p.m., I noticed the ticking had stopped. At first I thought they'd just run out of charge, which would have been annoying but not ominous. But when I went to check them, I saw something that made my skin tighten. Both clocks were frozen at 2:43 a.m., same time. Same exact position. I hadn't noticed it immediately, but the moment I saw it, something in my stomach turned. 2:43. That was the exact time Eleanor had come home the night I found her whispering in the kitchen almost a year ago. The night I first realized something was wrong. The night I walked away. I replaced the batteries. Still nothing. At 12:08 a.m., the lights dimmed. Not flickered, dimmed, like someone had slid a hand over the moon. The bulb above the kitchen table hummed like a tuning fork. The girl was sitting in the armchair now, not moving. She hadn't spoken again since the drawing. I cleared my throat. You tired? She shook her head once, slow, like it took effort. I asked if she wanted some water. She didn't respond. Just turned her head slightly toward the hallway, toward the back bedroom. I hadn't been in there in weeks. That room gave me headaches. It was where my uncle used to sleep before he died. It still smelled like cedar and old medicine. I hadn't touched it. I didn't plan to. She stood up, walked toward the hallway. I followed. Not because I wanted to, but because being alone in the room she'd just left felt worse than whatever might happen next. When she reached the end of the hall, she stopped in front of the closed door. The air grew thick, heavy, like it had weight to it, though it seemed darker than I remembered. She placed her hand on the doorknob but didn't turn it. Then, without looking at me, she said, "He's in here." My throat went dry. Who? She didn't answer. I opened the door. The room was empty. Dust particles drifted like snowflakes in the slant of moonlight coming through the window. The twin bed was still made, pillow untouched. Nothing had been moved. Nothing disturbed. Except the mirror. There's an old mirror in that room. Floor length, cracked down the center. Belonged to my uncle's wife, who died in that same bed 30 years ago. The mirror had always been crooked, leaning against the corner. Tonight it was upright, centered, almost ceremonial. And on the glass, drawn in what looked like condensation, were 5 words. I never stopped being here. I stepped back. The girl walked in, stood directly in front of the mirror, and tilted her head again. I watched her reflection. Her eyes stayed on mine. But in the mirror, her hands weren't at her sides anymore. In the mirror, she was holding someone's hand. There was no one beside her. But her reflection showed her gripping something tall, pale, shapeless. I turned to the real girl. Her hand was empty. I looked back at the glass. Still holding something. Still smiling. I shut the door and locked it from the outside. I didn't sleep. I didn't blink. I sat by the fireplace with the journal on my lap, flipping through page after page of Eleanor's shaky, spiraling handwriting, hoping to find some explanation, some answer, some instructions on how to handle what was happening. I only found one new entry I hadn't seen before. dated 4 days before she arrived. She says he doesn't want her anymore. He wants something that remembers him. Something older. Something that left once and never said goodbye. And beneath that, in handwriting that wasn't Eleanor's, sharper, etched in deep black pen, he remembers you now. At exactly 2:43 a.m., the hallway light turned on by itself. Not a flicker, not a surge, just a clean, deliberate click, like someone had flipped the switch with purpose. I was sitting in the kitchen with the fireplace down to glowing coals and a mug of black coffee I hadn't touched in over an hour. I hadn't even realized I'd been staring at the doorknob of the back bedroom until the light came on and broke the spell. The girl was nowhere in sight. I assumed she was still locked in the bedroom down the hall. The journal was in my lap, open to the page with the message, "He remembers you now." I had spent the last hour trying to convince myself it was Eleanor playing games, that somehow all of this could still be untangled into something explainable. Sleep deprivation, psychosis, shared delusion, anything I could hang my sanity on. But the moment the light came on, I felt it in my spine. Something was awake in the house with me. I stood up slowly, deliberately, every instinct screaming at me not to walk toward the light. And I don't mean that metaphorically. I mean literally. The hallway light was now a presence. It had weight. The way it spilled onto the wooden floor felt intentional, not mechanical. Like it was drawing a line, daring me to cross it. I picked up the flashlight and gripped the cold metal tighter than I needed to. My hands were shaking, but I moved forward. Each step toward the hallway felt like walking deeper into someone else's dream. My breathing sounded too loud. My heartbeat didn't feel like mine. Then I heard it. The sound of bare feet stepping on wood. Slow. Heavy, wet, but the hallway was empty, and the sound wasn't coming from ahead of me. It was behind me. I spun around. The kitchen was dark now, completely. I hadn't turned off the light, but it was dead. The only glow was from the dying coals in the fireplace, and even that seemed to retreat into the brick, as if afraid to cast shadows. I turned back. The hallway was longer than it should have been. The guest room door, the one I'd locked, was wide open. She wasn't in there. But something else was. It was standing at the end of the hall, not in shadow, not obscured, but fully visible, and yet my mind rejected it. Like it refused to register what my eyes were telling me. It was tall, taller than the ceiling allowed, and it was bent, crammed into the space in a way that felt offensive to geometry. Its limbs were wrong, not just long, but slack, like they didn't know what direction to move in. And the sound it made when it shifted its weight? It walked like it remembered having bones, like it had once been human, and had been carrying that memory around like a bad habit. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't scream. I did the only thing I could think of. I slammed the hallway door shut and threw the bolt. Then I backed away until I hit the fridge. I slid down to the floor, panting, heart pounding so hard I thought I might black out. And that's when I noticed the phone on the counter vibrating. It wasn't mine. It was Eleanor's. She must have left it in her coat pocket. And for some reason, a miracle or a curse, it had signal. One unread voicemail. Timestamped just an hour earlier. I picked it up and played it on speaker. The voice was hers. Shaky, urgent, whispering. "James, if you're hearing this, it means I didn't make it back in time. I'm sorry. I thought I had longer. I thought it would wait." A crackle. A distant wind. It doesn't want her anymore. It wants what's missing. What it remembers. It wants the part of itself it left behind in the room. You were supposed to be gone. It never planned for you to come back. Another silence. Then, don't let her open the mirror again. Click. I dropped the phone. The hallway door creaked. Not loudly. Not like in movies. Just a soft, dragging sound of wood expanding under pressure. I looked up and saw the bolt slowly sliding back. Not being forced, not broken, just moving. Willingly. Like the house itself was complicit. I ran to the bedroom and slammed the door behind me. I didn't even check if the girl was there. I just locked it, shoved the dresser in front of it, and collapsed against the wall, gasping, knees buckling under me. Then I heard the voice. Not behind the door. Inside the room. And it wasn't hers. It was the same voice I'd heard whispering to her that first night. "Now do you remember me?" I turned slowly. The girl was standing in front of the mirror again. But this time, her reflection wasn't facing her. It was facing me. And it was smiling. I don't remember screaming, though I must have. I don't remember falling, but I hit my head on the radiator, trying to back away from the mirror. My vision went sideways, white at the edges. But I remember the sound. The voice. The way it filled the room without echo, without breath. Now do you remember me? I did. Not all of it. Not clearly, but enough. It wasn't a memory like a photograph. It was a feeling, a moment from years ago, maybe when I was 4 or 5, buried so deep I thought I'd made it up. A moment in a hallway, back in the first house I ever lived in. My mother was yelling on the phone in the kitchen. I'd wandered down the corridor alone. I remember a mirror. One I wasn't supposed to touch. And I remember touching it anyway. My hand hit the surface, and the reflection grabbed back. Only for a second. But enough. I screamed. My mother ran in, furious, thought I'd cut myself. There was no blood. No mark. But I never forgot the cold, the pull, the way it felt like something had noticed me, and wouldn't forget. That night was the first time I ever sleepwalked. It wouldn't be the last. I think, whatever it was, it attached itself then. Not fully. Just a piece. Just enough to follow. Enough to wait. It didn't want to take me. Not yet. It wanted something more. Something stronger. Something it could grow in. Eleanor never knew. How could she? But when we met, when we moved in together, when we came into contact again, whatever I had buried stirred. And when she got pregnant, it saw its chance. Not through me. Not even through the girl. Through absence. Through what was missing. It never needed a body. It needed a void. And now, all these years later, it had followed that void to this cabin. To me. To a house full of silence and splinters, with nothing left to guard the door. Except me. Except memory. Because memory is a door, too. And this time, I didn't run. I stood. Bleeding, shaking, jaw clenched, knees unsteady, but I stood. The mirror rippled. Not literally, no movie magic, but in my mind. My gut. My spine. And then the reflection moved. The version of me in the mirror walked forward, while I stood still. My reflection did not match. It stepped right up to the glass and pressed its hand against it. And for a moment, I saw it. The thing behind the eyes. Not evil. Not in the way we think of it. Not a demon. Not a ghost. Just forgotten. Something that had once been part of something whole, and was now hungry for form. I stepped forward. I didn't run. I touched the glass. And this time, nothing pulled me in. Because I wasn't afraid. And that's what broke it. The mirror cracked. Just a hairline. Just enough. And then the light came back. First the hallway. Then the kitchen. Then, softly, the sound of wind moving through trees like it was clearing something out. The girl let go of her reflection's hand. She turned to me. No smile. Just wide eyes. Human eyes. Child eyes. She whispered, "Is he gone?" I nodded. And she nodded back. Slowly. Like someone much older than she looked. I carried her to the couch. She fell asleep in my arms before I even sat down. Her breathing was steady. Deep. Peaceful. For the first time, I saw her face relax. Whatever had been sitting behind her eyes, it was gone. Or at least, no longer looking out. The next morning, I heard footsteps on the porch. It was Eleanor. She was barefoot, covered in dirt, but alive. She saw the girl sleeping on my chest and collapsed to her knees, sobbing so hard it sounded like someone trying to breathe underwater. I helped her inside. We didn't say much. There wasn't anything left to say. We just existed together in the same room, for the first time in what felt like years, and watched the sun rise. We stayed at the cabin for 3 more days. No more whispers. No more drawings. The mirror? I took it into the woods and buried it under 6 feet of dirt and salt. Just to be sure. Just in case memory ever tried to become something else again. Eventually, we left. Separately, but not broken. Eleanor went to live with her sister in Maine. She's working on herself. I believe her. She writes me postcards. No return address. Just a small photo of the girl, smiling. Actually smiling. Me? I kept the cabin. I fixed it up. Replaced the locks. Put up new shelves. Adopted a dog named Clover who barks at every mirror in the house, which I now take as a good sign. I'm still soft. Still overthink everything. Still cry during the last scene of The Iron Giant. But I'm not hollow anymore. And sometimes, around 2:43 a.m., I wake up. Not from a nightmare. Just to listen. And all I hear is nothing. Which, for the first time in a very long time, feels like peace.